And good afternoon. Welcome into the Monday, November 23rd edition of Market Talk. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Great to have you back with us here today. MarketTalkAg.com. That's how you can find us, MarketTalkAg.com. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find us there as well. It's all at Market Talk Ag, and all of your favorite podcast sources, wherever you listen to us: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Audible, and so many more. Great day in the markets. Let's bring in our guest with Total Farm Marketing by Stewart-Peterson. Our good friend John Heinberg is joining us on a Monday afternoon. John, how are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to the holiday.
I am looking forward to the holiday as well. I got the turkey ready to go and going to enjoy it with a very close, tight-knit family group here this year, as COVID is obviously making a lot of those celebrations tough to have those big family gatherings. But we won't talk about that. We will talk about some positive news in the marketplace today. I know many media outlets reporting vaccines are becoming more and more possible here soon, and that kind of gave a shot in the market, or shot in the arm to the market. It seemed a little bit, at least one piece of that shot in the arm today. Soybeans, we're nearing that $12 mark, John, and I'm curious, are we going to reach it before Thanksgiving? I mean, we're within striking distance, very close striking distance.
Well, at least in terms of the close. I mean, the January contract actually tapped it today at $12 even on the high. So now we got to see where things kind of go from here. I mean, let's get right into that South American weather. That's the biggest factor that's playing in this market right now. Again, forecasts over the next couple of weeks are staying on the drier tendencies. We are starting to hear some reports of, some limitations in terms of what we could see in this crop. Maybe more of a corn story here than a bean story. They're still going to get a solid bean crop out of South America. It may not be a bin buster record like we were talking just a couple months ago, but, they're still going to throw 120 million tons at the market, which, is still a fairly good supply. But on that corn front, the first crop corn, which has landed in the southern part of Brazil, is moving along very nicely in terms of its maturity. That's the corn that they use to replenish their domestic stockpiles, and if they're behind already there, that could carry over into potentially more imports and things of that nature. So that's something that the optimism in the market's starting to price in here if we continue to watch those forecasts. Then from there you're looking at that bean crop again. If they're dry going into the end of their growth cycle and the harvest window, that could delay the planting of the safrinha crop corn in Brazil. That again is the corn that is on the export market that we compete against in the late summer months. So right now you're seeing a market that's maybe starting to think about some of those things possibly coming true. We are in a true weather market here, but it's a South American weather market. So with that, I got a little bit of optimism. I love the price action again today in both corn and beans. We put some new highs on the front month contracts. Even though we faded back, we found some buying strength at the end. Again, just kind of continues to tell us that there's money looking to move into this market. So we'll have to see. This week is holiday week, so it could be choppy trade, shorter type trade in terms of volume, which could give us some pretty big price swings. But the big number I'm watching, especially in beans, that 1208 area, that was a 2016 high. If we cross through that and close above that maybe by the end of the week, that could send in another wave of technical buying that could probably head us towards the 13 window. The supply side says it can do that. On the corn side, March, we double topped the contract high today at 350 or 435 and 3/4, excuse me. So we got to see if we can get through that barrier, and then again the technical buying kicks in. So it's going to be an interesting couple of days, especially with the holiday being in the middle of the week.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we tapped $12 in beans. I should have led with that point. We didn't close there though, but we did tap that very briefly today. And man, I'm just looking at this, and I think I'm with you. If we can reach that here by the end of the week with the shortened week due to Thanksgiving, and maybe breaks through some of that resistance on both the soybean and corn side, no telling where we could go the next month.
When we get to a window, it turns into a technical buying type situation. The fundamentals kind of get thrown out the door, even though they're the support under the market. And regardless where the managed money is in terms of their fund positioning, and then realistically on beans, they actually tightened up a little bit last week. So there's some room for them to pump some money into their position on the longer side. They'll buy this thing. And if they got a reason to own it, they will own it. And that's kind of what we're seeing here in this window. Now, I don't want to get too euphoric and optimistic and things of that nature, you got to still understand a weather market will leave us very, very quickly. The old stair step up, elevator down mentality is still in my mind. And make sure you're staying focused on those targets. And if you move some grain, talk to a way of getting some ownership in or keep some ideas in that regard. Don't fall asleep on just safety valve puts, and make sure you're protecting the floor just in case this thing falls apart. Last thing you want is over also in the week of Christmas when you want to be enjoying that holiday and we're correcting going into the end of the year and you're sitting on the sidelines and not ready to protect yourself.
Yeah, and John, I think that's a great point you bring up with just the holidays in general. We're seeing this movement in the market, and if you don't have any protection underneath you, or you kind of get complacent maybe during the month or during this week with the holidays going on, especially with where this market is at right now, really not a time to get complacent. You should keep an eye on this market going through the rest of this trading week.
I'm not saying pull the trigger and make cash sales. If you're bullish in the market, you think it wants to go higher, you do want to stay disciplined to obviously to what your targets are, but maybe instead of having a target on the top side, have a stop in your mind on the bottom side. Write it down on paper. If the market closes under X, you pick up the phone and move some grain. That type of mentality. That's how I handle long positions in the market. We got working stops under the market. If it rolls over, those producers are going to get kicked out of long positions. Same thing in that regard in terms of your cash sales. And then you use puts that are expensive now because the volatility is high. But you just say, okay, if worst case scenario is this is what I got to at least protect me in case this thing tumbles. Again, I talked about the end of the year. I am cautious about that because there will be a window in here, whether it's in the stock market, this market, or other commodity markets, that they're going to take some profits off the table to make the balance sheets look really good for the end of the year. And we could see a pretty big pullback just in that alone, giving us a great buying opportunity to start the year. But that's something that's on my radar for the month of December, is to make sure we don't see that profit taking move that they can liquidate some of these longs.
Well, John, another thing I want to ask you about here as well today, we've kind of seen this bean oil and soybean market tied together the last few sessions. Soybean meal has been trying to play catch up to that. Decent day in meal today. What's kind of an update on where the meal and oil markets stand right now?
Well, the oil market's one to still kind of keep an eye on. Again, even today, China put a restriction on sunflower oil imports because of the cost side. So that means they're going to be looking at alternatives, and that's where soybean oil comes into play. We continue to see good strength in that Malaysian palm oil market again. So if that's expensive, they're looking for alternatives, and then they're going to the soybean oil market. So that market, did have a little bit of a softening today. Now we do have to keep in mind also the December contracts are getting to first notice day. That was why some of the December corn prices just couldn't keep up with the other months. You had a lot of options expire on Friday that got probably exercised in the long futures, and they have to be out of those by the end of the week or risk delivery. So we're going to see some selling pressure. And you saw that today in December oil, as well as even in the wheat market a little bit, just keeping some pressure on that front month. So watch how that plays out as the week goes on. But again, that oil market and the meal market still has strong demand after we get through these, I would say, the next few weeks. We're poking up around that $400 a ton level. That's a pretty big barrier of resistance. We poked over it today to a new contract high. At least we stayed positive today. Now the question is, can we get through $4? At that case, we go to $4.50 per ton on soy meal. And if we see that, that's going to add another good, strong move to the bean side to the up.
The wheat market, John, a decent day there as well. And that's been a weather market. We've talked about it quite a bit. But just after what you saw today in the wheat market, anything new to report there?
That was really kind of a follow through type process. In other words, staying with the corn and the beans and kind of just tagging along. The funds have moved to a fairly smaller, long position there. So they've been taking some money out of the market. You look at the charts, though, a little disappointed today. We had a good, strong start today. We fell back under some moving average resistance. So it looks a little bit toppy in here. We need probably some good follow through from the other grains to pull wheat higher. Again, it's still coming down to that global supply. Last week's export sales and numbers were not very good for U.S. wheat. So we're going to have to see how that shakes out. I'm a little fearful. Typically, we see some decent strength into the first part of December, and then we see this market kind of roll over. So I'm watching this $6 window. We can't seem to fight back above it here today. It could turn into a bit of a psychological sell if we can't get back above that psychological price level.
John, let's switch over to livestock. We had a disappointing close last week to end the week, but today, kind of a welcome sight, I feel, for livestock producers across the board. We saw cattle and hogs trade higher, specifically that cattle market looked pretty strong here today. We're already seeing some early activity in feedlot country just with the holiday shortened week. Start with cattle. What did you see there today that caused us to get a little bit of a pop in the market?
Well, first off, we had that cattle on feed report on Friday, and we oversold that going into that report. Whether it's the COVID fears and things of that nature coming into play in this market in general, so that market was pretty oversold going into that report. Report came in line to friendly. We look at a market now that's probably got a fairly current and tighter and more manageable feedlot supply out there. So that's the biggest thing I'm kind of watching now. So the market priced in fairly now. You mentioned cash trade, did see a little 110 again, which is disappointing, considering where we are with the retail side. But again, with the holiday week, they're not going to push real hard because they just don't have the demand for cattle. So I'm kind of looking towards next week. Let's see what happens as we get in December with that cash trade. Can we start getting into that 112, 13 plus window? The retail values, choice carcasses up $4 today. Choice select spread pushing almost $29 between the two. That tells me we've got a lot starting to get kind of current, and that again that supply is getting pretty manageable, and the packer may have to finally start stepping in and getting some cash on the upside in order to get those cattle secured. So that's going to be a big factor going forward. What happens with that retail demand? Does it hold, and can we get that cash trade going? I love today's move. We got a gap open on those front months today off a reversal on Friday as we kind of started pricing in maybe that report a little bit. So the technical picture's improved. Now we just need to see some follow through. It may take a couple days with the choppy week this week, but I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where this cash market can get to, as well as this cattle market as we get into the first of the year.
Yeah, and I wonder as well how much the vaccine news that we keep getting here each week with more positive news on the COVID vaccine side today. I wonder how much that's going to play in to these livestock markets as well.
That's going to be a big part of it too. I mean, obviously that was a lot of the chatter last week as we get back into packing plants and what happens to the cattle flow, and if these plants close again. That was all some of probably the negativeness of last week. Again, you're looking at equity market that loves the news about the vaccine. It's still going to take time. The other side that's still really encouraging. Excellent week on the export front in terms of its numbers. So we'll see if that continues this week. And that grocery store retail demand is still very good, even though we're still losing restaurant trade. Consumers are figuring out that they can go to the store, pick up a pretty good piece of meat, and take it home and make it themselves.
Yeah. Let's switch over to the hog side, John. A little bit of the cattle excitement seemed to spill over into this hog market, even though this last month's kind of just been a sideways, choppy market here. Looking at hogs today, what are some positives you're taking out of that market?
I'm actually a little concerned regarding that market overall. I mean, we got a nice pop here, more of a technical type lift. We rallied to price resistance today and we just couldn't get through it. We'll see if we can with the rest of the week. But you had a market that was getting oversold, and then we just turned around and had a technical recovery on Friday and a little follow through today. Biggest thing is the fundamentals just still aren't there. We put about almost 2.5 million head on the slaughter floor last week, another 497,000 estimated today with heavier weights. That's just a lot of product to work through, and we've been seeing that in the retail prices. We just can't seem to even hold strength there. We've had midday strength that fades into negativeness by the end of the day. So I'm a little concerned on that hog market, especially with this pop. Is this more of a short covering bounce that producers probably should be targeting into? Or is it truly a turn? I think what happens with cattle could be a big factor in that. If we just see some strength across the entire livestock sector could help out. But I'm watching those, that 70 level on April, the $80 plus level out in the summer is a scenario we start getting some floors underneath and at least make sure we got something protected just in case that demand side of the equation doesn't follow through into 2021, because we definitely have enough supply.
And I think a lot of folks are maybe watching that pork cutout value as well here, just as we move forward. Can we get some long-term strength there? I think that's something that people will be watching. Is that something you're watching too?
I'm watching that, very much so. We dropped back under the $80 carcass level here. Now we're still a little bit above where we could be in terms of 5-year averages. So there's still some room for that carcass value to come down. And, fourth quarter is just a heavy production quarter in terms of the amount of hogs that are coming at us. And that just looks reflective on the price. continue to see the lean hog index trend lower, and now we've got that new pork carcass cutout value contract out there to work with a little bit. We're seeing the index on the pork carcass values even still trending lower, even though we saw a little bit of a snapback in the carcass today. So right now I got a lot of mixed signals. At least most of them are pointing to the downside here. So I'm just curious, can we get enough technical bounce to sell into? That's kind of what I'm targeting here in the short term, unless something really changes.
John, any other final thoughts about the market here today, or any signs you're seeing as we head into the holiday shortened week?
Again, holiday week, it's kind of a hands-off type week because the traders just aren't there. They'll be active today and probably half the day tomorrow, and then we'll really see the volume start lightening up, which could cause a lot of price movement. So, don't read a lot into the holiday week type trade unless we really see some super strong movement. Then then you come back and prepare one way or the other when everybody comes back on work on Monday. So with that, it could be an interesting week overall. The buying strength seems to be here in the ag sector in general. Hopefully that can continue as we move into the end of the year.
John, if producers want to reach out to you and get a little advice about their marketing needs, how can they do that?
Love to chat with them. Have them give me a call at 800-334-9779. Feel free to shoot me an email at johnh@totalfarmmarketing.com.
John, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks for pinch hitting today, and I know we'll talk to you after Thanksgiving. I wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Same to you, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and stay safe.
John Heinberg with Total Farm Marketing by Stewart-Peterson, our guest today here on Market Talk. Find us online, markettalkag.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find us there as well at Market Talk Ag. And you can also find us on your favorite podcast sources, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. This has been the Monday, November 23rd, 2020 edition of Market Talk. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.